Good afternoon.
Howdy. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about lots, and I wanted to talk about this because I'm listing some lots, but also because a lot of realtors don't sell very many lots, and there's some things that that you need to look out for depending on what you're using the lot for, things that make it more valuable, more usable and stuff.
Sure.
So,
what are we going to start with?
So a lot of people, when they have a lot for sale, they'll look, just like when you have a home for sale, they'll look at something else that's sold and they're like, well, that one's the same size as mine and it sold for this price. Why is mine worth, so much more or so much less? So some of the basic things, like if you're buying a regular building lot, like to build one house on, some of the things that are not always taken into consideration is where the utilities are on that lot. So out in the valley, we usually do well and septic, but if you're in a city where there's water and sewer, that's a consideration. But out here, we're looking at gas, which is not always available, and the electric. Most of the time you're building a house, you want at least electric. If you have to use fuel oil instead of natural gas, that's okay. I'll give you a quick example of a lot that I bought several years ago where I messed up. And when I learned this, it was years ago, I bought a lot and it was down this little road. It was a really cheap lot, just because the area it was in. Across the street from this were several houses that had power. So I made the assumption that the power was coming down the street because it kind of made sense when you were looking at it. And then I, bought the lot, spent a bunch of money on the lot, putting in a well and septic, and then called the utility company to get power. And the houses across the street were actually getting it from the street behind them. And so I paid, this was years ago, $5,000 for this lot, and it was going to cost 20 or 30 grand to get electricity because we were going to have to go all the way around all these other houses. And I got really lucky that we were able to secure the easements we needed from certain people to make it 20 grand instead of 30 grand. And the neighbor next to me split it with me, so because we were both benefiting. So she didn't really have to. It was very generous of her, and she was benefiting, but I needed it because I was building a house. Yeah. So that was, it cost me 10 grand and her 10 grand, where I thought it was going to be $2 grand from the street. So where the power is and actually verifying that, hugely important. There can be, a lot of times in the listing, it'll say natural gas in the area or electricity in the area. It can be really close and still cost tens of thousands of dollars. So you might have a good building lot that's worth, 40 grand, and you might think that yours is also worth 40 grand, but it might cost 40 grand to get the power there. It's still worth something, but not nearly as much if you don't have the utilities there.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Natural gas is pretty expensive to move by foot. If you're in the municipality of Anchorage, all the utilities and sewer and water is so expensive. It's just crazy. But where the utilities are is a huge consideration. So.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a property that I showed yesterday. It had a house built on it, but obviously it started out as a lot at one point. And what I noticed about it was that it was on almost an acre and a half, which my client really liked. And there's some degree of separation from the neighbors, which is nice, a little bit more privacy for folks who like that. But the house itself was sitting on the only buildable area of that lot. So if my client was wanting to build, a detached shop or a shed or anything like that, it might not have been super feasible because the dirt work around would have cost so much money because the house sat on a pad. The rest of it was downhill into a sloping ditch. There's trees everywhere, so now we're talking excavation, we're talking bringing in dirt, moving around dirt, making it buildable, flattening the pad, making sure that it's stable enough to put a structure on, all the things, and that can add up really quick.
As far as bringing in dirt, sometimes you're lucky you've got the dirt somewhere on your property. You can mine the dirt from a hill to bring it to where you need it. If you have to bring it in, people don't realize how ridiculously expensive that is. Even if you have a cheap source, it depends on where it is. Now you're paying truckers to move it, and it costs a lot. You can be very deep into getting dirt moved to your property.
I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's $300 an hour just to have those truckers moving.
Well, they're driving $100,000 to $200,000 worth of equipment a lot of times, unless it's an older dump truck or something. But if you've got a nice new truck and this big side dump trailer, that's a lot of money. So you're paying for that, the insurance, the fuel, and the professional driver with their CDL. Yeah. It's expensive. I don't know what it is per hour, but that doesn't seem stupid.
Yeah, it's expensive.
And so if it's right around the corner, that's great. When they're building a new subdivision, they're doing a whole bunch of lots, they try to find gravel on site to build the roads and paths and stuff. If it's coming from across the town, you're going to lose money on the whole project.
And something that we came across when we were doing our barn project, we are on 9 acres, and so when we saw the trucks hauling our dirt off the property, we immediately stopped them and said, wait, we're at 9 acres, like you guys can dump some of this dirt and mine some dirt like you were talking about from here. And it did save us thousands of dollars, so make sure you're communicating with your contractor if you do have land that you can mine from. If not, and you have to go off site, then factor that into your budget.
Another consideration you mentioned was the slopiness made it to where only part of it was usable. I think you said that. I had some lots listed several years ago that on paper they look great, and on the map they look great. It was acre lot or a couple of them next to each other, whatever they were. I think it was a few acres total owned by the same guy. And you look at the aerial view, you look online, you see they're well treed, they're in a good area, nice houses. You drive there, the road's like this, and then the lot just went straight down, and you're like, well, if you bought all 3 of them, you could zigzag down there, and then maybe you're not in the swamp at the bottom, but you feel like you got views on the road. You got great views, but you can't build on the road. I never got those lots sold, and I recently saw that they foreclosed. They just tax foreclosed. The guy owned them free and clear and just let them go back. Like, nobody could sell them. He couldn't give these things away because it would cost a fortune to build on the side of the cliff like this, and it wasn't that kind of lot that would be worth it for that,
Yeah.
And so, if it is sloped, you can design a house if it's not crazy like that one. You can design a house that works. You see a lot of, especially in Eagle River and the hillside in Anchorage where there's a bunch of mountains. There's a lot of houses built on the side, and they'll have like a shop or a garage.
Or like a walkout basement.
Yeah, if you can get a driveway around the bottom, sometimes there's a garage there, and that's pretty cool. But that's a big consideration. It'd be uncommon for people to buy lots sight unseen, where they didn't actually walk the property. But some people, they see these beautiful lots. yeah. But you didn't pay a huge amount for it, and
I feel
you're
pretty confident.
familiar with the area. But yeah, if you do want that style of house, a really good tip if you're shopping for a lot to build your future house is to have your dirt work guy look at it before you buy it. If you're concerned about a slope or you're concerned about potential wetlands, you can usually during the purchase process you can have the excavator go out there and dig a test hole, which basically they dig a hole in the ground and they see what kind of soil it is, whether it's gravel, sand, clay, which isn't too common around here, but it can be a problem if you do hit a clay vein. And then they see how much water seeps into it. If you dig down and it fills all the way with water, that can mean that you're gonna potentially pay a lot more money for a septic system, which is fine if it's in the budget. You just want to know and budget for it. If you're gonna have to put in a $40,000 septic, if you're building $1 million house, that's not crazy. But if you're planning on a more modest house, and that's a lot of money coming out of a starter home.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, you kind of briefly just glossed over it and kept moving, which some of our listeners might not understand what you meant by it, but you said if you hit clay, that could be a problem. And just from my personal experience, it can be, obviously, I'm guessing, a problem with the septic and drainage and whatnot, but for our purposes, we had put in a French drain around our structure, and our contractor put clay over the top of the French drain, which isn't ideal because the water can't seep into the French drain to drain properly. So now we have to, come spring, remove the clay off of the top of our French drain so it can actually drain.
Yeah, and that is the problem with the clay, is that it's not very absorptive, something like that. And
doesn't absorb well.
Yeah, that one. And so out here in the valley and a lot of places in the state, most places in the state, we're on septic systems. And so when they dig the test hole, they look at the soil and the absorption rate of the water, and the engineer is going to design your septic system based on that. If it's clay, they can still do a septic system, but it's going to have to take up more area, and they're going to have to haul in more gravel or septic rocks or whatever they do, so that it's a much bigger system, because it doesn't absorb well into clay. So they'll have to pull a bunch of it out and replace it with gravel, which they do that. They remove soil and put in septic rock and gravel on both systems. It's just, they're all designed different depending on what you hit there.
Yeah.
So,
and so Tyler had mentioned having your contractor go out and dig test holes. A lot of times with new construction, folks, and it just depends on how you do it, but sometimes people say, well, I'm going to buy the piece of land first, and then I'm going to go find a builder or a contractor to build my house for me. I think it's pretty good and smart advice to say find your contractor first. That way they can help you do your due diligence on that piece of land and make sure it's something that they can work with.
You don't have to have your whole dream home plan necessarily if the beautiful piece of land that you think might be a awesome place in the future, but you do want some excavator at least to test a few things. But if you've got something special in particular in house design, that's not a bad idea to have, your builder look at the whole lot. So.
Absolutely.
On the flip side of that, other than when you're looking for a lot, if you're looking to sell a lot, here's some things that have annoyed me over the years when I've had clients who buy a lot for, say they buy it for 40 grand and then they go and they rent an excavator or hire an excavator and they push down a bunch of trees and they get it all cleared and they might spend 5 grand in dirt work, which is pretty quick and easy to do. And now they think their property is worth more because of it. And generally that is not the case. Not only is it not worth more, but you didn't save the buyer any money. Because when you're building a house, I've had a couple built, the excavator is going to come in and they're going to charge you for a building package, which is all the excavation. They're going to clear the trees, they're going to install the driveway, they're going to dig the hole for the foundation, and then once the foundation is put in, they're going to backfill the foundation. A well driller is going to come drill a well in the valley where we have wells, and the excavator is going to dig the well line so that they can put that in and backfill that. So there's a lot of excavation work done at the beginning of a build, and they call that the building package or the excavation package. And they're not going to charge you less because the previous owner cleared some trees. They're going to be out there for a week doing heavy equipment stuff with a $500,000 piece of equipment.
Regardless, I mean, it's a fixed cost. They're going to be out there, and that's their biggest expense right there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're not saving them any money. The other thing is you might come and clear out a bunch, and the person's like, man, I know you cleared out the middle of the lot, but I really wanted the house to be over on the right side anyway, so I could put my shop on the left and have some, whatever. So I've never seen a buyer say, wow, I'm glad that the seller cleared this area. Never once is that helpful.
The other thing that I've seen, landowners do prior to building and hiring a contractor is they'll dig their own foundation, and then it'll freeze, and then they'll hire the contractor, and now the contractor says, well, we have to let this thaw so that way we can, cover it up, basically fill it in, make sure that it's a good solid foundation, because they're the ones that are going to be warrantying the work now. And so they're going to want to make sure it's a good solid foundation before they start building on it. So
you mean somebody dug the hole or actually put one in?
They dug the hole, and that was it. They didn't put in the blocks around it. They just dug the hole, and they thought, oh, well, that saved the money, and it didn't. They had to redo all the work, and it actually took more time and effort and energy, and probably, if anything, I don't think the builder charged them extra, but if anything, it would probably cost them extra time and money. So
Yep. So that's a little bit of information for single lots, but I want to touch just a second on larger lots. Mm-hmm. So I had a client years ago. This property popped up. I don't remember all the numbers, but it was a bunch of acres, like 10 or 20, nothing huge. And it was in an area that was pretty popular, and it came on the market for what looked like a reasonable price based on the acreage, like if you were going to build your dream home on this nice acreage lot. I think it was a couple $100,000 or a few hundred, I don't remember. My client calls and he's like, dude, I want to offer like $150,000 more than asking. And that was a vast amount of the price. I'm like, you want to offer almost twice on this property? And he's like, yeah, I sure hope I get it. I'm like, what? And so he's like, yeah, that's all I could scrounge, but we got to get this offer in immediately. Just hit the market. So we offered just a ridiculously high price in cash, close in 2 weeks type of deal. We got outbid by 6 figures. I mean, it was astronomical. And the agent who used to be here, she was a great agent, sold a lot of real estate. She's like, what did I miss? Well, most realtors don't sell land, don't understand what can make some land so valuable. And I didn't either. This was years ago, and I'm no subdividing expert, but I'm doing some subdividing now. And my client was subdividing and making really good money. It's a very capital intensive, it takes a lot of cash, really niche. And he's like, dude, that was a gold mine, and she didn't even know it. Or, you put it on the market with a good realtor, bid up. They got the fair market value, which was, I think, more than twice what they're asking. It was many hundreds of thousands over. And he's like, look at how subdividable this lot is. Usually a 10 or 20 acre piece, you might be able to cut it up a few ways. This was on a corner and oriented right, So it was on 2 paved roads, good usable land with utilities and roads on multiple
Was it
sides.
Settlers Bay?
No, it wasn't. It
Okay.
was out in the Butte.
Okay.
And so he's like, you could cut that up so cheap. So when you're subdividing, there's a lot of costs. One of them is building the roads. A lot of times you subdivide, they make you build the roads in. Well, this already had roads on 2 sides. It was on a corner, so they weren't going to have to spend much on roads. Another huge expense for subdividing is getting the utilities in. You don't always have to do that, but if you don't, the lots aren't as valuable. This had utilities all over it, had the roads all over it. It was perfect cut-upable area. And he's like, man, I could have made $1 million on that property over the next few years if I'd have just been able to scrounge an extra 150 to get in that. And if you looked at comparable properties that weren't as suitable for subdividing, she had it priced right. It was reasonable for that many acreage for like an estate property that you were gonna, put a driveway in and build your dream home type of thing. Would have been a cool property. But everybody that knew what they were talking about, they're like, that is exactly what I'm looking for, to cut it up into 10 pieces or 20 pieces and make, whoever bought that probably did make $1 million over several years. And they would have had to put in a bunch more capital, but less on that one. So when you're looking at bigger parcels, whether you're looking at selling or buying, there's a lot of little nuances, what kind of trees and how old they are and how wet it is and whether there's gravel there or not. So there's a lot of things to look at. One more quick on one of my failed attempts to subdivide is I was trying to buy this 40-acre parcel one time and get it all subdivided up, and it would have made a lot of money. But before the borough lets you subdivide, you have to do test holes, and they have to verify that your lots have enough usable area for septics. They used to not require that, and people would go subdivide places into tiny little lots, like some of the neighborhoods out here. And then if you put a well and septic on one lot, and then 2 doors down you put a well and septic, the middle lot wasn't big enough to have a legal separation far enough. So you have some of these lots that were subdivided that you literally can't put a well and septic on. It's really silly. So now they require that. And I probably still could have made money on this property, but the borough was going to require me to haul in dirt, which we talked about being expensive. Was going to have to haul in enough gravel for several of these lots so that all of them had enough area for a septic, which I thought was crazy because they all had the area, and these lots I was going to be selling at a really nice price. They were going to be several acre lots, and they were going to warrant a more expensive septic. You can put a more expensive septic in, but in order for them to approve it, it was going to cost me about $300,000 in dirt before they said yes or no. And then if they said no, I'd have been bankrupt at the time. Like, I can't spend $300,000 and 500 grand on the property.
So you say there could be a chance.
So 500 grand on the property, 300 grand on dirt, and then if they'd have said yes, I probably would have made $1 million on that one too. I mean, it was.
But your profit margin would still only be 300 grand, right? If you're still talking
No,
about
no.
5 plus,
No,
you're talking profit.
I mean
net
profit. Yeah,
Okay.
I would have made. I don't know what I made. It would have years ago.
Okay.
It was going to be really good, but it was going to take multiple years to do this and quite a bit of money. I was willing to spend that 300 grand, but not unless they said yes first, and they weren't going to do it until then. So I had to back out of the deal because I it was one where it could have been a home run, but it could have bankrupted me if some bureaucrat said no.
Yeah.
And that's not the type of risk I'm into. So yeah, a little bit about subdividing and lots in general. No, there's just not nearly as much information on purchasing and selling lots out there as there is on homes and such. So get some lots ready to list, and wanted to chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, and Tyler's really good at listing lots. I've gotten better about it since partnering up with this guy. But I will say, I'll be the first to admit that I am a great realtor when it comes to selling homes. And I've referred a lot of my lots out to him just because he seems to sell them a lot quicker and for more money than I do because of his experience. So make sure that if you are hiring a realtor to sell your lot or help you buy a lot, make sure that they know what they're doing.
Awesome. Well,
Awesome.
thank you very much. Have a nice
Thank
week.
you. Enjoy.